Dear family of dreamers, have you ever felt like you're staring at a massive puzzle, and no matter how hard you try, the pieces just don't seem to fit? We've all been there. The challenges of life and of wealth building can often feel that way. It's like you're working on something important, yet it seems impossible to put it all together. The more you try to force it, the further it seems to slip from your grasp. But there is a powerful principle that, when understood and applied, can transform your entire approach to success, wealth, and life. That principle is called assess, invert, always invert. So you see, it's not always about moving forward, about trying harder, about pushing faster. Sometimes the key to solving a problem is not to focus on the solution at all, but to focus on the res reversa of the problem. What if, instead of asking, how do I make money, you ask, how can I lose money? What if, instead of saying, how do I become successful, you asked, what actions and decisions are guaranteed to ensure failure? It sounds strange, doesn't it? But inverting the problems often provides a clearer path to success than simply charging forward blindly. So let's explore this together, because it is a powerful tool, a tool that has been used by the greatest minds of finance and business. And it's a tool that will help you avoid the pitfalls that so many others fall into, the ones that drain your wealth, your energy, and your time. Now, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine that you're standing at the edge of a vast sea of opportunity. But just below the surface, lurking in the deep waters, are unseen dangers. The mistakes, the bad decisions, the temptations that can shipwreck your journey before you even get started. What if I told you that the most successful investors and entrepreneurs are not the ones who avoided these dangers entirely, but the ones who had the wisdom to see them coming, to avoid them, and to step around them? That's where inversion comes in. By identifying the mistakes that can lead to failure, you can avoid them and navigate your path toward success. It's about making fewer mistakes and learning to understand and anticipate what will go wrong before it even happens. Inversion works in every part of life, but especially in the world of money and investing. Most people spend their lives chasing after the get-rich-quick strategies, thinking that wealth will come from the next hot stock, the next big deal, or the next trend. They look forward, chasing after what they think they want without ever stopping to ask themselves, what can go wrong here? What mistakes am I likely to make? The answer to that question is the key to your success. I want to take you back to a time in history, to a story that illustrates this idea beautifully. In the early 2000s, there was an investor, a young, ambitious man full of hope and determination. He had the world at his feet, or so it seemed. He had read all the books, watched all the videos, and done the math. He had it all figured out, but he was missing one thing: the understanding of what could go wrong. The young man decided to go all in on a booming technology stock. The company seemed like the next big thing. He saw its rapid rise, and the temptation was undeniable. Everyone around him was making money. How could he not? But he overlooked the most important factors. There's the underlying risk, say. He ignored the warning signs, the irrational exuberance in the market, the overpriced stock, the lack of solid fundamentals. He ignored the simple principle of the sells invert, always invert. What happened next? The bubble burst, and in the blink of an eye, his wealth evaporated. The stocks plummeted, and so did his financial future. He didn't ask himself, what could go wrong? He didn't think about the risks, the things that could sink his ship. And as a result, he was left with nothing. But here's the twist in the story: that young man didn't stay defeated. No, he has learned. He learned to look for the dangers before they appeared. He learned to step back and think about errors, what could go wrong. And when he did that, he finally started to build lasting wealth. The lesson here is clear. In the world of wealth building, it's not just about knowing what to do, but about understanding what is not to do. Respected viewers, as we continue, I want to invite you to think deeply about the way you approach decisions, not just in investing, but in all aspects of life. The key to using the invert, always invert, principle successfully is not simply identifying opportunities. It's identifying where you are most likely to fail, where you might make the critical mistakes, and avoiding those traps before they ensnare you. Think about it. How many people have you seen chase after the next big stock? or put their trust in high-risk ventures, only to find themselves burned by poor judgment. These people aren't lacking intelligence or ambition. They're simply making the same mistake as over and over, because they're looking at the world in one dimension, always asking, what's the next opportunity? Without ever stopping to ask, what's the next mistake I can avoid? To truly understand how inversion works, let's take a step back and examine our mindset, the framework through which we make decisions. Most people approach investing with optimism. They look at stocks, real estate, or business ventures and think, this could be the next big thing. The numbers are good. The market is strong. This is where I need to be. They see only the potential for gain, never considering the risky. But what inversion teaches us is that focusing on the risk is just as important as focusing on the reward. By inverting the process, you take yourself out of the equation of our blind optimism and start asking critical questions. What could go wrong with this investment? What do I stand to lose if things don't go as planned? What am I missing that could derail my success? This shift in perspective isn't just a tactical advantage. It's a mental transformation. You begin to approach life and money with a sense of guarded optimism, where you don't just see opportunity, but you also see the potential dangers that lie beneath the surface. This proactive thinking allows you to take action before the problem becomes real. You take calculated risks, not reckless gambles. Consider a classic example in the business world, the wars.com bubble of the late 1990s. Everyone was rushing to invest in tech stocks, and for a time, it seemed like the future was being built before their eyes. But the question that a few people asked, the question that might have saved them, was, what's the downside? And when the crash happened, when billions in value disappeared overnight, many were left asking themselves, how could I not see this coming? It was clear in hindsight. The companies were often as unprofitable. Their business models were weak, and they had no real plan for sustaining themselves long term. But most investors didn't think to invert their thinking. They were consumed by the upside, the potential riches, without ever considering the risk of a massive loss. That's the power of inversion. By turning the problem around, you get a different perspective, a perspective that helps you make smarter decisions. Where's the power of asking the right questions? So, how do you apply this to your own investments? How do you learn to invert the process and avoid the same mistakes? It starts with asking the right questions. And these questions should always be aimed at uncovering potential risks, uncovering flaws in your assumptions. When you're about to make an investment decision, take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself, what could cause this investment to fail? What weaknesses do I see in this opportunity? And am I being swayed by emotions or hype? Are there any red flags I've overlooked? When you start asking these questions, as you develop a more comprehensive understanding of what's at stake, you start thinking like a strategist, like someone who's building a long-term foundation, rather than someone who's simply chasing after short-term rewards. The difference between success and failure often comes down to the ability to foresee what's not immediately obvious. Many investors and business owners are blind to risks because they never stop to consider them. Inversion, however, forces you to look at the world from a different angle, to examine the dangers with the same intensity you'd examine the potential rewards. Let's take a moment to reflect on how powerful this shift in perspective can be. Imagine you're about to make a major investment. Most people will jump straight into the numbers, the projections, the growth potential. But inverting your process means you pause before you even look at the upside. Instead, you first ask yourself, what could I lose here? By considering the loss first, you automatically shift your focus toward minimizing risk. It's not about avoiding risk altogether. Risk is a natural part of life and business. But it's about being smart, about being thoughtful, and about ensuring that you're not putting yourself in a situation where the downside outweighs the potential upside. When you learn to invert, you begin to see the world as a series of probabilities, not certainties. You're no longer gambling with your future. You're managing it with wisdom and clarity. And that's the key to building wealth that lasts. Beloved listeners, let's take a step deeper into the heart of this principle. because inversion isn't just about avoiding the obvious mistakes. It's also about setting yourself up for long-term success by making small, intelligent decisions every day. You see, life is not just a series of monumental moments. It's the large accumulation of daily choices, habits, and actions. The small decisions you make today are what will compound into your future wealth and well-being. And inversion, in this sense, helps you realize that every decision matters. When we look at the wealthiest individuals, the people who have built lasting legacies, they didn't get there by being reckless. They didn't achieve success by following the crowd or succumbing to the temptation of quick, easy gains. They understood the importance of avoiding mistakes at every step along the way, and they knew how to make decisions that compounded over time. Their wealth was built not from a few big wins, but from a series of small, consistent decisions. Think about compound interest. It's often called the eighth wonder of the world, and for good reason. Compound interest teaches us that small amounts, if invested and left alone to grow over time, can turn into something much greater than we could ever imagine. The same principle applies to our daily decisions. Small, consistent actions. Whether it's investing in knowledge, being disciplined with your spending, or simply learning to say no to short-term pleasures, these decisions compound over time to create wealth, both in your bank account and in your life. But inversion plays a role here, too. If you look at what could go wrong, if you truly consider the risks, you can avoid the small mistakes that add up over time. For instance, let's take a simple habit: saving money. Now, to some, it may seem like an obvious thing to do, but so many people fail to make it a consistent part of their lives. Why? Because they don't invert the process. They don't ask themselves, says, what's the cost of not saving? What would happen if I don't make this decision today? When you fail to save or invest consistently, those missed opportunities compound against you. But when you take the time to make a small, consistent decision each day, to save a little bit more, to invest a little smarter, to avoid that one unnecessary purchase, those actions over time begin to multiply, and before long, they lead to extraordinary results. Avoiding the pitfalls of overconfidency. One of the most dangerous traps many people fall into, especially in investing, is overconfidences. Overconfidence is a killer. It blinds you to the risks, and when you're blinded by your own certainty, you make poor decisions. You think you know it all, but in reality, you're just gambling with your future. Let me give you an example. It's an all too common scenario. Imagine you've made a few successful investments. You've seen some returns, and you feel good about yourself. So good, in fact, that you start to believe you can't lose. The confidence builds, and soon you're taking larger risks, putting money into high-risk ventures that you don't fully understand. You think, buzzer, I've got this figured out now, buzzer. And just like that, you've fallen into the trap. This is where inversion works its magic. If you invert the mindset, you start to ask yourself, what are the risks here? What's the worst-case scenario? Instead of allowing your success to feed into overconfidence, inversion encourages you to humble yourself, to continually question and challenge your assumptions. It reminds you to never stop asking, what could go wrong? When you make this a part of your decision-making process, as you build a much stronger foundation for success, you avoid the blind spots that come with overconfidence, and you approach each decision with the clarity and humility required to make truly wise choices. Inversion in personal growth and relationships. It's important to note that inversion doesn't just apply to your financial life. It affects every aspect of your existence, from your personal growth, to the relationships you build, to the way you see yourself in the world. Think about how inversion can play a role in your personal development. Most of us spend so much time focusing on what we can do to grow, to become better, to succeed. But have you ever thought about what you need to avoid in order to grow? What habits, mindsets, or people in your life are holding you back? Sometimes the key to personal growth is not just what you add to your life, but what you remove. What beliefs do you need to let go of? What toxic behaviors need to be erased? Inverting this process can lead you to a greater understanding of how to move forward in a way that's both fulfilling and successful. For instance, if you've ever been in a relationship that didn't serve you, Whether it was a friendship, a romantic partnership, or a business relationship, you might look back and realize that it wasn't just that the relationship wasn't working, it was that you were erstairs involved in something toxic, something that slowly drained you, wore you down, and kept you from reaching your full potential. By inverting the process and asking yourself, what would happen if I continue to stay in this situation? You can start to see the warning signs before they become major issues. Dear family of dreamers, as we enter this next phase of our journey, I want you to think about the one thing that everyone on a path to wealth seeks: security. We all want to feel safe, comfortable, and assured that our decisions won't come crashing down around us. But let me tell you a hard truth: wealth does not come from simply seeking comfort. It doesn't come from protecting what you have and never taking any risks. True wealth comes from the intelligent application of risk, calculated, considered risk, and the consistent effort to grow and protect your assets and your legacy. This is where inversions truly becomes powerful. It allows you to protect your wealth while also continuing to expand it. Let's start by understanding the two sides of wealth building: has growth and has protection. On one hand, you want to take smart risks, make investments that grow your wealth, and pursue opportunities that can amplify your returns. But on the other hand, you want to protect what you've already built, to shield yourself from unnecessary risks that could destroy your financial foundation. How does inversion play a role here? It teaches you to look at growth and protection from a reverse perspective. You ask yourself, what would cause me to lose it all? And then use that information to protect yourself from falling into those traps. This process doesn't involve avoiding all risks, but rather avoiding the ones that can undo your progress. Take investing in the stock market, for instance. People often dive into individual stocks or high-risk ventures because they see the potential for massive gains. But by inverting your approach, you stop and ask, what would cause this investment to fail? Suddenly, you're not just thinking about the growth potential, but about how you can protect yourself from catastrophic losses. This is why so many successful investors opt for ARS index funds, as diversification, and ARS long-term, low-cost investing. They're not simply betting on the next big thing. They are protecting themselves against the risk of a single mistake or misjudgment. They understand that as wealth is built over time, not overnight, and by strategically diversifying and thinking about what could go wrong, they put themselves in a position where even when things don't go perfectly, they'll still have the foundation to recover. Learning to protect what you build. Let me share a story with you, a true lesson in wealth protection. Several decades ago, a man I know made a large investment in real estate. He was ambitious, smart, and confident in his decision. The property was in a growing area, and all the signs were pointing to a profitable future. But before he signed the deal, he asked himself one crucial question: what would make this investment fail? He didn't just ask about market trends or potential profits. He dug deeper. What risks could affect this investment? Could interest rates rise? Could there be a market downturn? Could unexpected repairs and costs drain his profits? He thought about the worst-case scenario, a scenario that could wipe out his investment. In doing so, he didn't shy away from risk. He calculated hit. He decided to purchase the property, but with the safeguards in place. He set aside extra capital to cover unexpected expenses. He locked in a favorable interest rate, and he didn't overextend himself. Over time, the market fluctuated, as it always does. But because he had considered all the potential risks and prepared for them, he was able to ride out the storms without being knocked off course. He didn't get greedy, and he didn't ignore the dangers. He protected his wealth and allowed it to grow steadily. This is the power of inversion in protecting your wealth. When you look at potential losses before you ever make a decision, you put yourself in a position to mitigate those risks and safeguard your future. Accelerating your growth by avoiding bad choices. Now let's talk about the other side of wealth building as growth. We all want to grow our wealth, expand our businesses, and increase our returns. But how do we accelerate growth without putting everything at risk? The answer is to make growth a process of calculated, informed decisions. Decisions based on not just the upside potential, but the downside risks. When you look at an investment or opportunity, inversion teaches you to ask, what's the worst that could happen here? By considering the downside, you're forced to weigh the potential reward with a clear understanding of the risk. This means you don't gamble on blind hope, you make strategic, informed choices that will propel your wealth forward without exposing yourself to ruin. In business, this same principle holds true. When you're launching a new product or service, you don't just throw yourself into it without considering what could go wrong. What happens if the market doesn't respond as you expect? What if customer demand falls short? By asking these questions, you position yourself to mitigate failure before it happens, ensuring that even if things don't go as planned, you won't lose everything. This is how you grow wealth sustainably. Growth doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't come from taking reckless risks. It comes from gradually scaling while always being aware of the obstacles that could derail you. By using inversion, you build wealth steadily and securely. Beloved listeners, now that we've explored how inversion shapes both your approach to risk and your strategy for growth, I want to talk about something that ties it all together. That's the long-term mindset. Because at the end of the day, success isn't about getting lucky. It's not about finding the one big deal or riding a trend to the top. True success comes from consistent, patient effort over time. It comes from the wisdom to avoid mistakes, to see what others don't, and to make decisions that will not pay off tomorrow or next month, but many years down the road. Inversion helps you see the long-term consequences of your decisions. It teaches you that wealth is built through compound actions, not just in terms of money, but in terms of the small, steady decisions you make each and every day. Wealth isn't about the instant gratification of making a quick return. It's about seeing your actions and your decisions as part of a much larger picture, a picture that unfolds over decades, not days. And it's this mindset that will determine whether you achieve the type of success that lasts, the kind of wealth that endures beyond your lifetime. Think about this. The richest people in the world didn't get there by playing it safe. They took risks, yes, but those risks were always calculated. And most importantly, they had the patience to see their investments and efforts through, even when things didn't go perfectly. They understood the value of time, and they knew that real wealth is the product of consistent long-term decisions. Thus, the power of consistency over time. There's an old adage that goes, success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out, and it's absolutely true. If you look at the wealthiest individuals, the ones who have created businesses, investments, and legacies that span generations, you'll see a common thread. They never stopped us. It wasn't about one big decision that changed everything. It was about making the right decision over and over again. It's about asking, what could go wrong? And adjusting before the mistake becomes too big. It's about protecting your wealth, growing it steadily, and ensuring that you're always one step ahead of the problems that could arise. But consistency doesn't mean stagnation. It means evolving. It means constantly adjusting your approach based on the lessons you learn, both from your successes and from your failures. And by doing so, you start building a future that isn't dependent on luck, but rather on your ability to consistently make intelligent, inverted decisions. Here's a simple example. Let's say you invest in index funds and commit to a long-term, low-cost strategy. At first, the returns may not look as dramatic as some high-risk investments, but the beauty of this approach is that it compounds over time. And over years, those small, consistent gains add up to something much greater than any single speculative win. The same principle applies to personal growth. If you dedicate yourself to learning a little bit every day, to making small improvements in your habits and mindset, those small changes accumulate. You don't have to make drastic changes overnight. You simply need to stay consistent, keep asking the right questions, and never stop growing. The final lesson, inversion is a guide to inner peace. I want to end by reminding you that inversion isn't just a strategy for building wealth. It's also a strategy for building inner peace. It's about aligning your mindset with reality and learning to make decisions from a place of wisdom rather than fear or greed. When you invert, you don't just protect your wealth, you protect your mental and emotional health. You stop chasing fleeting opportunities and instead focus on what truly matters. You understand that wealth is a tool, not the goal itself. The goal is a life that is full of purpose, balance, and fulfillment. We live in a world that often equates success with more money, more fame, more status. But true wealth, the wealth that lasts, is not about amassing things. It's about creating a life that is aligned with your values, a life where your decisions are guided by wisdom, patience, and a sense of responsibility to yourself and to those around you. As you continue your journey, remember that the most powerful tool you can use isn't your knowledge of the stock market or business trends. It's your ability to pause, to invert the process, to ask yourself what could go wrong here? And from that point, you begin to move forward not with uncertainty, but with this purpose. You take calculated risks, you make fewer mistakes, and you build wealth steadily, with the awareness that this journey is not about overnight success, but about long-term visions and a true financial peace. Beloved listeners, as we bring this journey to a close, I want to leave you with one final thought. The power of inversion is not just a mental exercise. It's a causeway of life, a way of navigating the complexities of the world with a clear mind, a steady hand, and a soul at peace. It's about learning to see the world not just through the lens of opportunity, but through the lens of risk and responsibility. Sure, it's about balance. True wealth isn't built from a singular moment of brilliance or luck. It's built through the quiet, deliberate choices you make every single day. It's built by understanding what not to do, and through that, creating space for what is truly important. We've talked a lot about money, about investing, and about how to protect and grow your wealth. But wealth, real wealth, isn't just measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in time, in health, in relationships, in mental peace. And when you apply inversion to your life, you're not just avoiding financial pitfalls. You're also learning how to live with intention, how to make decisions that align with your long-term goals, and how to create a life that doesn't simply chase fleeting pleasures, but instead builds something that will last. Inversion teaches us patience. It teaches us that success doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from a steady, consistent progress. And that is where true freedom lies. Freedom is not just about having more money or more material things. It's the freedom to live life on your terms, knowing that every step you take is one that has been carefully considered and thoughtfully chosen. So, as you move forward on your own journey, whether in wealth, business, or personal growth, I encourage you to take a moment each day to ask yourself, what could go wrong here? And more importantly, what can I do today to protect my future? By practicing this simple but profound inversion principle, you can create a future that is secure, prosperous, and aligned with your highest values. May you find peace in your decisions. May you build wealth not only in your bank accounts, but also in your character, in your wisdom, and in your heart. And may you live a life that is full, rich, and meaningful. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Your future is bright, and the best is yet to come.